down to business.
When he drinks, he thinks.
That's the nectar of the gods, baby.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the #1 liquid-fueled, liquid lubricated show on the interwebs. This is the Whiskey Musings Broadcast, and I can see the menagerie of malcontents and misfits have all joined in to watch the program tonight. I want to give a few shout-outs. Number one, I need to give a shout-out, to Outlawed Dogs. I believe it's Delaware High water moccasins, if I remember correctly. I'm sure Outlaw will correct me. But I've got to give a shout out to the 58 girls that competed tonight or are competing tonight. And yeah, so hopefully you girls did what you were supposed to do in your meet. And you know, we're all looking forward to hearing about all of the wonderful activities that are going on. Hopefully you gals, ladies, did quite well in your at your swim meet tonight. Delaware Valley water moccasins. I'm sorry, Outlaw just popped in the Rumble chat, which, by the way, if you're watching on any of my other platforms, I highly, highly, highly encourage you to go over to the free speech alternative to YouTube over on Rumble, because I guarantee you that's where the party is at. But I do see people popping in on Facebook, so I definitely cannot overlook them. Thank you very much for joining. I do appreciate it. You know, obviously there is, or there has been in the very recent past, times where, you know, Facebook and YouTube haven't played nicely with conservatives. And so that's why I'm keeping to advocate for Rumble, the free speech alternative to YouTube. You know, go over there. It's really not that hard. You just sign up for an account and subscribe to the channels that you like. And so, yeah, Rumble does not cost any money to have an account on Rumble to go over and watch. In fact, you can even watch the shows for free. You can watch everything over there. You can watch it. Now, granted, they do run some ads if you're not signed in. And maybe if you are signed in, I don't know. I actually have a paid account over there for this purpose. But definitely, if you want to head over there, that's great. I do have Twitch people out there too. I got to throw that out there, and I am streaming on Twitter as well. So I finally got my Twitch stuff figured out, at least for the moment. So I apologize for missing last week. That was a snafu that essentially I couldn't avoid. So anyway, apparently they swim the water moccasins swim this Saturday. And again, keep in mind, as I told you on Saturday, they swim against their rivals, which they have not beaten them in 10 years. We're hoping and praying for all of them to come out of that meet victorious for sure. Okay? All right. Now, big news just hit as I came on. And you know, I got to tell you, this is some really, really big news, but it kind of plays into my first topic tonight. I have several topics. I want to talk about the Louder with Crowder versus Daily Wire kind of thing. And I also want to talk a little bit some more about some doc stuff that happened in the past couple of days since we last spoke, as well as a couple of other news articles that are coming out with regards to Nancy Pelosi and some of her things that are going on. Plus, I want to give another shout out to my two youngest listeners. First one is the second to youngest listener, Z. I saw Z in the chat. Z, thank you for coming back. I do appreciate it. I like it when younger listeners come on. Not that I don't like my general base, but you need to understand that in order for us to make a change in this country, we have to get the young people energized. We have to get the younger people into the movement, let's say, and that's where we need to really focus. And then, of course, I haven't given him a shout out in a couple of days, but or a couple of programs, but I'm going to do it tonight. My nice young 12-year-old youngest listener and advocate, and he has this wonderful Constitution of the United States, the Institute on the Constitution, in his possession. I know that because he got it as a gift for Christmas. So that is awesome. All right. Now, I don't really talk about this that much, but believe me, I do think about it, and I would appreciate it if you would help out the program by going to my storefront, my website, my storefront, store at store.whiskeymusings.online. You can get hats that have things like "When I Drink, I Think," Whiskey Musings. You can get things with my logo on them, like this GETTR as an example, but I also have t-shirts, shirts, sweats, all kinds of different clothing items and other items for sale over there. And the proceeds, the proceeds of it go right to supporting the show. And I would appreciate that. I know that, I know that money's tight and stuff like that. So I want to make sure that you get some quality products and stuff like that. So, I just want to say thank you for going there and at least checking out the store. I mean, go and take a look. See if there's something there that you like. I know some of you have purchased some items and have told me about how you enjoy them. The quality is good, that kind of stuff. So I would appreciate if you would just go to store.whiskeymusings.online and check out literally the plethora of products that are there for your perusal at store.whiskeymusings.online. I worked on that for about 5 minutes right before I came on the show, so that was pretty. I thought I was pretty. I don't know what they call that. I think they call that an alliteration. Anyway, whatever. All right. So now I need to let everybody know that just this. Oh, all right. I keep getting hit on this. What about the damn hats? Okay, so I told you guys I've got to work on see, this hat is actually separate from everything else that I have, and the reason being is because it was actually a gift from my son. Well, just to follow with the story, I found the manufacturer, and now I just need to get the let's say the sales into place. I need to get things into place, and then I'll be offering them up when I get them ready for you. Now, I will warn you right now, unfortunately, these things are made in China. I wish I could find a U.S. equivalent that would be something like this, but unfortunately, we are tied at this point to China in a lot of ways. So anyway, all right. So that's why. So there you go. All right. That's why. Okay. I'm working on that. I promise you, hopefully you'll be hearing something here in the coming weeks. I'm going to call it weeks, but I'm working on that. It's just a matter of getting them procured and then, of course, figuring out what I'm going to do with them. Okay. But hey, keep reminding me. Go ahead. Keep reminding me. All right. Keep reminding me about the hat. We'll go with that. All right. So what am I drinking tonight? Geez, I'm sitting here getting all excited about all this other stuff. What am I drinking? I am drinking the Four Roses single barrel. And as you can see, there's not that much left in this bottle. So I got to go and get myself another one. But this is the Four Roses single barrel that I have in my glass for tonight. And of course, I have my whiskey stones. You can't. Oh, there you go. Now you can kind of see them in there. I have my whiskey stones in there, and never fails. Never fails. I like it. I like it a lot. because, of course, when I drink, I think. Okay. So let's get into tonight's program. We're going to jump right into it. And by the way, I don't have a pet of the week for tonight. It unfortunately, so I guess in a bit of a way, the water moccasins shout out was the pet of the week for tonight. But anyway, all right. So, well, what do you mean? What do you mean, buddy? That's only one shot. I actually think it's actually like a shot and a half, to be honest with you. That's in the glass. There's maybe a shot left in the bottle. I'd have to pour it out and find out, but that's about it. And yes, Outlaw Dogs, I will look up and see if I can do buttons. Unfortunately my supplier is not exactly the best with certain items. So I'm working on it. I'm working on it, guys. You gotta help me out here. I'm just a one-man band. Anyway, all right. So let's get into the real meat of the story for tonight. Because of the fact that this is some absolutely great news. It does play into the whole Louder with Crowder thing, but this came out breaking right before I came on. Breaking news, which is Donald Trump is to be reinstated on Facebook and Instagram. Now, whether or not he actually does anything, I don't think, that's the whole purpose of this. I'm sure he will start posting. Keep in mind that Trump went out and built his own social media network, Truth Social. And the whole concept of Truth Social was so that he couldn't get banned on some of these other social media platforms. However, there's only one problem. And this, if you really think about it, this kind of leads into the feud between Crowder and the Daily Wire. But you cannot, in this space, you cannot ignore the fact that that the largest organizations that are out there in the streaming platforms, in the social media platforms and everything else, they are left-wing run. I agree. They're totally left-wing run. And that's not exactly something that I would care to. But unfortunately, as things progress and as we start changing things over, we have to understand and recognize that in order to get our message out, we may have to jump on things like YouTube and Facebook and Twitter, which are, Twitter, now that Elon Musk has taken over, is a much more happy place. But the realistic thing is places like YouTube and Facebook, we have to be able to send our messages to those locations. And so being able to have accounts on them, being able to have those accounts on those platforms and keep them open is doing nothing more than just helping to expand your exposure. So even though he doesn't actually do anything with it, or even if he does do something with it, it's still allowing him an alternative space to present his ideas and his messages out there. And so that's part of the reason why I am doing what I do, where I stream to YouTube. I mean, my following on Rumble, which is at 465 right now in terms of subscribers, is, again, 4 times as many as what I have on YouTube. And I'm looking to expand it and get it even more. My YouTube subscribers is only about 102. And so the thing about it is that you need to understand, especially in this kind of a space, is that especially when you're first starting out or whatever, you have to be able to expand your horizons if you're just getting started in this area. And so even though a lot of people will say focus on one platform, it's best if you're doing a message like this, you need to open and expand your horizons. Now, I completely understand if you don't like Facebook, if you don't like Twitter, you don't want to go back to them, that's fine. But you also need to understand that my position as a content creator and message sender is different in terms of communication than just somebody who might be out there as a single listener. Now, I have accounts on True Social, GETTR, Parler, Gab, Locals. I have obviously Facebook and Twitter. And so I try to post all the way across every single platform that I have, for the most part, the same thing, even though they each have different things that are going on. And yes, that is exactly right, 3 Chevy. You got to go where the people are. And so unfortunately, we may have to, as conservatives, we may have to work with these companies to work through some of this, but you can't necessarily just dismiss them out of hand. And so that's kind of what I want to talk about in terms of the Louder with Crowder deal. Now, for those of you that don't know, in terms of the Louder with Crowder Daily Wire scenario, and keep in mind, a few months ago, Louder with Crowder, Steven Crowder was looking for another home, let's say, for his content. And he had just broken off, or was getting ready to break off from the Blaze. And he was soliciting offers for people who wanted to take over helping him partner with him to make content. And, keep in mind, he's got a what I would consider a pretty big following on YouTube, something like 5 million subscribers. In fact, I think he dwarfs Ben Shapiro, and Ben actually talked about that. But the thing about it is that, again, keep in mind that Crowder was already on YouTube when this whole thing kind of went down. Now, you can make some semantic arguments about whether or not it was a term sheet, like Daily Wire says, that it was totally negotiable, non-binding, or it's a contract, like what like Steven is saying, in terms of, whether or not he's looking at, the actual thing as a full binding contract. That being said, I have to say both parties, in my opinion, are in the wrong in terms of how they handled this. Crowder for taking it to a public forum, and rather than attacking the contract, he attacked the individuals and the people, not necessarily by name, but in the industry, pretty much everybody knew that Daily Wire was probably courting him. So that whole thing, how Crowder did it, is probably not the most effective strategy, I don't think. And we'll have to see how things kind of play out over time. On the flip side, on the Daily Wire side, you need to understand that the term sheet that was presented was, of course, a tactic that is often used by lawyers. We start off with everything that we want, and then you take and cut down everything that we want with the idea that eventually we're going to get to something that we can live with. Now, it's a tactic. It is a negotiating tactic to do that. And the original sheet that was given to Crowder had a lot of requests on it that I know if I were brought that, I would be asking no, or I would be saying, no, I'm not going to do this. Now, if we take away the money aspect, because that's what Crowder wants to do, if you take away the money aspect of the whole thing, because realistically that money, that $50 million for the 4 years, was essentially, according to Crowder, his operating budget for that same amount of time. So realistically, there wasn't a whole heck of a lot of additional monies or reward out of that, based off of the videos that both parties have put out, and I've watched all of them. I've even watched somebody else who was a actual lawyer who kind of broke this down, and this is where I'm sort of sitting in the camp of, both parties are at fault here for bringing what should have been just a simple negotiation out into the public sphere and turn it into this whole thing to make it sound like conservatives are actually fighting each other. On the other side of the camp, again, one of Crowder's big things is he's saying, well, wait a minute, you shouldn't necessarily tie monetary compensation to something like YouTube. In terms of if I get demonetized on YouTube, then I get taken down at the same time. And realistically, if you look at it from the Daily Wire's perspective, it's like, look, if you do something that causes you to be demonetized, that impacts our bottom line, which in turn should, by reason of association, should impact your bottom line. And the thing about it is that Crowder is basically saying, why are you kowtowing to the left-wing social media outlets and everything else? Why are you kowtowing to them? And again, I go back to the whole point. You cannot overlook the elephants in the room. YouTube, Facebook, those guys have been around for a long time. They are a huge platform to deal with. And even with the whole point of, Crowder himself saying, because he did get demonetized, and Ben Shapiro actually said, hey, I even reached out to YouTube, at least according to the story. I reached out to YouTube and told them they were wrong about it, and I actually got some executives from YouTube on the phone, and we talked about it. So, the realistic situation here is that you cannot overlook the space, the YouTube space in the market. They have a large portion of the video market, and that's part of the reason why I transmit there. Now, unlike Crowder, I don't have any monetization going on there because I'm not big enough. And do I think I may be not being promoted? That's entirely possible. I can't say that I am, and I can't say that I'm not. But the key here is that when you're looking at the whole idea of whether or not a loss of a platform, regardless of whether it was YouTube or anybody else, the loss of the platform would have impacted the bottom line and the reach that was available for passing out the content, because not everybody goes to Daily Wire and actually pays for a subscription. So, this whole concept or this whole idea of, YouTube, if YouTube demonetizes me, I lose money, I can't lose money, well, then don't get demonetized. And Crowder brought up, and actually they discussed this on the Tim Pool interview with Crowder. Apparently Crowder had a t-shirt, and I can't recall exactly what was said on the t-shirt, but it was something that YouTube was not happy with. And so the YouTube executives called Crowder up and said, hey, you can't sell that on our platform. And so Crowder, being a little smart, he took it off. He started selling it in his separate store. And within that store, he kind of disguised it as a part of a box, is what Crowder was saying. Well, the YouTube executives actually called him back up and said, hey, we know what you're doing. You can't sell that or we're going to demonetize you. And he stopped selling the t-shirt. So in other words, he actually bowed down and kowtowed, his words, to the YouTube folks, okay, in the same way that he is telling or asking the Daily Wire not to. So honestly, I mean, again, I'm gonna kind of wrap this whole thing up really simply. If you're in a position like me, where I am attempting to grow and expand my listenership and everything else, there are certain things that I have to be aware of. One of them has to be my content strikes on YouTube. If you recall, back in November, I actually got a content on YouTube. I already got that strike, and I was actually banned for 2 weeks, I believe it was at one point. And so realistically, keep in mind that when you're in a conservative broadcasting space, because we do not have the market share of the platforms that are out there, what we need to do is we need to work with these organizations, get the message out there until some of these other platforms, such as Rumble, can grow and take up market share that YouTube is leaving off because of all of the places that they're kicking people off on. Now, you could look at Dan Bongino. Dan Bongino walked away from YouTube and basically told them, that's it, screw them. I am not going to deal with them. In fact, his video, as far as I'm aware, is still, his goodbye video is still available on YouTube if you want to go and take a look. But the thing about it is that when you're not in a position monetarily to be able to do that, which of course the Daily Wire would not necessarily be in a position because they have promised a ton of money to a bunch of different initiatives with the idea that in the future they're going to take over and kick big tech completely to the curb, okay? That's the goal, but that's not where they're at right now. And they can't afford to necessarily lose revenue streams to backfill for the money that they're promising to all of these different people. And at the same time, Crowder needs to understand that and realize that as far as he is concerned, he needs to help them and not necessarily demonize them for the idea of realizing the fact that you have essentially an 800-pound gorilla in the marketplace in the form of YouTube that eventually will go away and no longer be that 800-pound gorilla. But you need to steal away market share. You need to steal away accounts and get them onto platforms like Rumble, just like Russell Brand. You have Dan Bongino exclusively does Rumble. There's been a lot of announcements in terms of the high-end people that are starting to stream on Rumble exclusively. It's those kinds of contracts that will eventually knock down the market share that a place like YouTube will have. So to kind of sum all this up from my position, I mean, was it a crappy term sheet? Would it would have been crappy terms had Crowder agreed to it? Absolutely. But at the same time, though, what Crowder came back with, reportedly, according to the Daily Wire, was just as abysmal and was not indicative of what would have been a compromise. It was more of indicative of, well, you were saying F you to me, so I'm going to say F you to you. Now, the realistic problem with all of this, of course, is the fact that Crowder and Jeremy Boring and Ben Shapiro and several others at the Daily Wire in particular, they all have personal relationships. And so, unfortunately, I think a lot of their personal relationships have definitely been harmed by this. Whether or not they've been irrevocably harmed or not is really questionable. But when you're dealing with business situations like this, you have to take the personal out of it. Was it an insulting offer? Yeah, probably. Could you have gotten insulted? Sure. But at the same time, Crowder could have handled it in a little bit different fashion and come back to them and said, hey, look, guys, I don't like these terms. And, can we figure something out? Or if it really was that bad to the point where there was no negotiation that was going to happen, then Crowder should have been essentially an individual to essentially say, all right, obviously this isn't a good fit and we're going to walk away from it, like Tim Pool did. I mean, Tim Pool reportedly, according to the Daily Wire folks, is that they're still in conversations with each other. They still, appreciate what each other does. They just understand that the business model that the Daily Wire is making, plus the business model of what Tim Pool wants to do with his broadcasts and shows, are essentially not the right fit for one another. And that's fine. That is perfectly fine. But to sit here and to bring this all out into the public sphere and turn it into a he said, she said, or he said, and do all of these dirty, underhanded things like recording people without their knowledge and airing that on air and things like that. It's just, it's underhanded in both cases. The term sheet, I think, was very, very manipulative and definitely favored the Daily Wire, which I don't necessarily blame them for that. But considering that they had a personal relationship, it probably couldn't have gone quite so heavy-handed. At the same time, Crowder should have realized that, either things were not going to work or at least accepted some of the terms. So I mean, is this a really big deal between the two of them? Well, I think people are making it out to be a bigger deal than what it really needs to be. And, yeah, it's just horrible. It's just horrible. I don't like seeing conservative outlets, considering the situation that we're in as far as the culture wars are concerned. I really don't like the idea that conservative outlets are fighting one another on this. But at the same time, again, I just think that it was poor sportsmanship done by both sides. And that's all I have to say about that. All right. So, I don't know if anybody noticed, and I lost my cursor here. Hold on. Okay. I don't know if anybody noticed this, but there were some more classified documents that were found, in locations. And no, I'm not talking about Biden locations. What I'm talking about is this. Apparently, some classified documents were discovered at the home of former Vice President Mike Pence. Well, you know, if you listen to the program last Saturday, I think I said it then. I may have said it on the Wednesday before when this whole story broke. Folks, classified documents are going to be in just about every single one of these people's houses. It's just the nature of the beast. Now, whether or not that's legal or illegal, obviously it's an illegal situation. But at the same time, if they're not caught at it, then it's not, how is anybody really going to know? But here's the difference. Now, with former VP Mike Pence, he did essentially the right thing, which was he immediately turned them over and notified the FBI and notified Congress and notified the National Archives immediately as soon as he found them. But he started thinking about it and he wanted to correct himself. Not that much different than poor Jay on the Mark K show with the whole trivia thing. Okay. Mike Pence was an honest, I'm sorry. He is, I would consider him like on the borderline of the honest man, because not that he couldn't do anything constitutionally. There's just not enough information as far as the election part goes as to whether or not he is realistically just an administrator, or whether or not he could have actually sent stuff back to the states. You could talk to the legal scholars all day long and they have differing opinions about both. It's an area of the Constitution, I've told you, that is awfully gray and doesn't have a whole heck of a lot of detail. And so therefore you can blame him or you can not blame him. Both sides have valid arguments. Okay. But in this particular case, I feel that he acted appropriately. He went and took a look, found out that he had some, turned them in, and is trying to act in an honorable fashion. Unlike Biden. Biden had his lawyers search for documents. Not him, but lawyers who didn't even have clearances to identify the documents in the first place. That's number one. At least that's according to the story. But again, the other thing is that that Biden held on to it. They had the documents, the first round of documents, prior to the midterm elections. And so they held on to it and they kept it quiet for another month. That is the part that makes Biden's worse at the outset. Okay. Now, that being said, the challenge here, or the thing about this, is that we're going to start seeing now. If you recall from my last episode, I told you the actual finding of the documents is not the story. I'm in the Dan Bongino camp with this. The having classified documents is not the story. That's the story that the press want you to trace. They want you to be distracted over the fact that, classified documents were found. It's not the fact that the classified documents were found. It's what were those documents, who had access to them, and why in the hell were they sitting in those unsecured locations, in the idea where it's the vice president versus the president in terms of Trump. Now, we're starting to find out a lot more, which I have some of that here in just a second. But I want to point out, because this is going to be the story. I'm telling you, this is going to be a story that the news media are going to give you. A story is going to be that everybody had classified documents. And take a look at this. There is a report that came out that former President Jimmy Carter once found classified documents at his home. So realistically, keep in mind that this is going to happen. Papers are going to get stuck in together, and they're going to do, they're going to do what they do. That's not the story. The story is not that he had classified documents. It's what those documents were. What were they of? Who had them? Who had access to them? And what happened to the information that's with it? Now, what's really interesting, of course, is the fact that our last Democrat president, Obama, he won't say whether the Obama office won't say whether or not they're going to conduct a search for classified documents. Oh, I can already tell you right now that, yeah, he's got them. I can almost guarantee you he has them. He probably knew that Joe had the ones that he had. I mean, that wouldn't pass I wouldn't pass that. Pass on that kind of thought. It wouldn't surprise me at all. But through all of this, Breitbart actually had the right question in this next article. And I just want to show you this, that Kamala Harris is eerily silent on this entire thing about documents. She isn't saying anything here on the Biden documents. Okay, so this is, I'm not going to necessarily say that this thing is, shall we say, indicative of a problem, but it is kind of eerily odd that the vice president hasn't been asked a question on it. And what's even worse, it hasn't even really commented on it. Not even to the point of like Karine Jean-Pierre, who basically says, well, I refer you to the White House counsel. I refer you to the White House counsel, over and over and over, like a repeating record. All right. So this situation is going to get even more and more and more. It's going to expose more and more. Now, I know there have been a couple times that I've said, hey, this is worse than Watergate, the whole Twitter files thing. Hey, this is worse than Watergate. Well, honestly, the document scandal, the Hunter Biden laptop story, the whole Twitter debacle and everything else, all of these things are wrapped together, folks. They are all the different avenues and different facets of the exact same thing, which is that we have a cabal of individuals who have been in government for so damn long, they have entrenched themselves, and they're colloquially known as the swamp or the deep state, or both. Either way, that goes. Okay. Now, Merrick Garland, or Meritless Garland, as Mark Levin calls him, came out and said that there is no double standard of justice in the Biden classified docs case. Well, we all know there actually is a double standard. There always has been a double standard when it comes to things like the Democrats versus the Republicans. Because I can guarantee you, if Trump had actually had things like the nuclear codes or any of the other things that they were accusing him of, I guarantee you it would have been plastered all over the papers. But have you noticed that the only thing the papers are talking about right now is the comparison between the two cases? They haven't said anything. In fact, the FBI hasn't even said what type of documents that they quote unquote found at Mar-a-Lago, which ironically, the FBI had access to them. The FBI knew about them. The FBI told the Secret Service to add another lock to the door that was at Mar-a-Lago. And again, just pointing out, Mar-a-Lago actually has Secret Service agents, where Biden's residences for the years that he spent away from being vice president and into president did not have the Secret Service security there. And Hunter Biden had access to all of that. We know this. I've covered it before. Dan Bongino's doing an awesome job in terms of covering all of this particular story. And I encourage, if you have not listened to his last 2 or 3 podcasts, you really, 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 really need to go and listen to them. He brilliantly ties all of this together. And a lot of it comes from the Hunter Biden laptop. But the point is that Merrick Garland, he's a liar. He's pissed off, honestly, that he didn't get in on the Supreme Court. And I think he's a liar. He's a despicable AG for us. And, he needs to go. He needs to get impeached. He needs to go as well. Okay. So I'm going to do this just so I can see where I'm at in my articles. Oh, and one other thing that we found out about the classified documents. So initially it was documents that were from Biden that were when he was vice president during the Obama years. Well, come to find out that apparently he actually had documents from back when he was a senator. Okay. Now, if you recall, he was in the Senate for something like 30 to almost 40 years. And so now the Federalist asks the question, which I think is on everybody's mind. Biden was a national security threat long before his classified docs fiasco. Folks, he had classified documents back from when he was a senator. The question is, what information was contained within those documents, who had access, and where did that information or who did that information get disseminated to? Now, the thing about it is that, again, he basically has been in government for his entire freaking life. Okay. He has never held a private sector job, to the best of my knowledge, even though he keeps trying to sound like that's the case. He is not. Okay. He is not. I'm just going to tell you. And as I've said on the program, as a lot of other people have said on the program, a senator does not have the approval to, 1, possess those documents, and 2, to even declassify documents. A vice president does not have the authority to do so either. And that is realistically a part of the Constitution because of the fact that the president in the Constitution, the president is the executive branch, the head of the executive branch. And so therefore that guy can basically do pretty much anything that he needs to in order to administratively administer the law from an executive standpoint. But the vice president has his or her duties assigned specifically within the Constitution. And one of those duties is not to be able to declassify documents, regardless of what Obama did with his executive order saying, oh yeah, Joe can just go and he can declassify docs. Executive orders cannot override what the Constitution states. Now, that is the vice president does not have that capability. The president does, though. And that's been actually backed up by the Supreme Court. So we need to make sure that we understand that the documents that Trump had, he could have easily said, these are declassified and take them. And nobody would have been able to do anything to him. As far as Biden is concerned, up until 2020, he was not president, and therefore he should not have those documents. Same thing goes with President Carter. President Carter having classified documents is not necessarily a bad thing because he could have declassified them while he was president. Same thing with Bill Clinton. Same thing with Barack Obama. But the point is that Joe Biden was not the president at the time that these documents were taken. And so, yeah, this is a bit of a problem. Okay. So, and let me just switch out just to make sure. So now the question becomes, one of the claims that the Biden camp has had is like, hey, the difference between Biden's docs and Trump's docs is the fact that Trump was obstructing justice. Well, apparently that wasn't the case. So first of all, we know that the first round of documents was found before the midterm election. Okay, that's number one. Number two is the fact that we didn't hear about it until, December, January timeframe. Okay. But now there is a report from some sources that, and this is coming from CNN now. Okay. So this isn't like a right-leaning organization that's reporting this, but apparently there were some sources that came out and said that the Justice Department was prepared to seek a warrant had Biden not consented to the home search. So, what the heck is going on here, folks? I mean, seriously, the Justice Department was prepared to seek a warrant like they did with Trump. And, Biden, this indicates, this is a good indication as to why all of a sudden Biden's lawyers were looking for those documents, not being a cleared individual who could have, gone to and seen these. This would have been enough push if the Justice Department basically said, look, if you don't find those documents, we're going to do a search warrant. We're going to execute a search warrant if you don't consent to the home search. So, yeah. This just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. To be completely honest with you, I don't even think it's done yet. I really don't. So one of the things that has come out about this, and again, you've got to watch Dan Bongino. Dan Bongino shows especially the last 3 episodes of his podcast. He ties a lot of this together. And if you haven't gotten his book, Follow the Money, there's some really good information there. If you haven't gotten the book from Miranda Devine about the Hunter Biden laptop called Laptop from Hell, there's some really good information in there as to how all of this works. So one of the questions that has come out of the docs is the whole point of, again, who had access and where did that information go? Well, we have a little bit of a hint in the fact that there was some pictures that were released early this week of Hunter Biden actually being in the green Corvette that was sitting literally in Joe Biden's garage next to the documents that were found, I think, in either the second or third round. Okay. We also know, like I pointed out in my last episode, that Hunter Biden claims to have been paying rent to Joe Biden for that same house. So now we have this coming out. Because of the fact that we have the revelation that, Hunter Biden obviously had access, physical access, because Hunter went into the garage and was able to pull out the Corvette and was able to get the engine repaired, according to his own claim. We now have things like this article in Town Hall that indicate that that Hunter Biden might be in a lot of trouble here. But apparently he wrote an email that was found on the laptop. It was found on the Hunter Biden laptop that everybody's been picking, and nobody, by the way, nobody has denied that the contents inside the laptop is actually real. In fact, if you recall a couple episodes ago, I even told you that one of the intelligence people, one of the 50 who signed that letter saying that, it's Russian disinformation, has come out and said, oh yeah, well, we kind of knew that at least some of that stuff was real. So we now know that number one, the laptop is real. Number two, the information contained on it is real. So now we have this coming out in terms of an email. Now, apparently he went and wrote an email, and Tucker Carlson actually talked about this. Okay. But apparently he wrote an email, a long, well-informed email about Ukraine, Russia, and the UK. Okay. well, wait a minute. What documents were found in the garage? What did they contain? Well, reportedly it was on, oh my gosh, Ukraine, Russia, and the UK. Well, listen to this. On April 13th, 2014, Hunter Biden sent an email to his business partner in Burisma, Devon Archer. Now, he sent this a week before his father, who was the vice president at the time, flew to Ukraine to meet with the Ukraine's prime minister. In the email, Hunter Biden composed a detailed memo with nearly 24 data points about the political and strategic situation on the ground in Ukraine. What's so immediately striking, and Miranda Devine pointed this out, having read the entire laptop, is that this email bears no resemblance to anything else we have that Hunter Biden has ever written. In other words, the cokehead didn't sound like he wrote it. Gee, kind of like a teacher finding plagiarism in a classroom. All right, back to the piece. In fact, it sounded like something produced by the State Department. There's no question that Hunter Biden used classified materials to assemble this email. Listen carefully. The strategic values to create a land bridge for RU to Crimea, he writes at one point. Notice he uses the diplomatic abbreviation for Russia, which was RU, because he's in the know. That won't directly affect Burisma Holdings, but it will limit future UK exploration and utilization of offshore opportunities in particular. It will also, Hunter Biden added, further destabilize the UK nationally and for whatever government is in power, and the US will respond with even stronger sanctions. Those sanctions will threaten the tenuous support of the EU, which does not have the political will to incur steep energy price increases, and so on and so forth. Okay. So here's the thing. All right. Here's the thing. The information that was in Joe Biden's garage, we know from reports, has covered the UK, Ukraine, and Russia. We also know that apparently Hunter Biden had access to that garage to where those documents were stored. We also know now that he sent an email to his partner prior to getting the job at Burisma Holdings. Wrote a long email that apparently was not his usual diction and not his usual style of writing. Folks, this is, I'm telling you, I swear up and down, I believe Dan Bongino. I believe that this is, it's not about the fact that the classified documents were there. It has nothing to do with that. What it has is that it has to deal with what access did Hunter Biden in particular, but who else had access, because Hunter Biden was reportedly passed out in the garage next to the documents while a Chinese representative from a Chinese company was actually there. So at the house. So we have no idea who had access to these documents, and don't get wrapped up, and just, I believe Dan Bongino, don't get wrapped up in the whole, visitor logs or any of that stuff, even though I hear the Secret Service has agreed to the Congress probe or the House probe to hand it over, to hand those over, but don't get wrapped up in all that. The point here is that what we are literally seeing with this is we are seeing a president now who is a literal foreign agent. And I'm not talking like Dan Bongino says, I'm not talking about 007 foreign agent. What we're talking about is a advocate for foreign entities within the American system of government. This is further evidenced by the fact that Joe Biden just announced today that he is going to be sending, or that we are going to be sending, M1 Abrams tanks over to Ukraine. The Pentagon doesn't think it's a good idea, but Joe Biden went ahead and announced it and said that he's going to go. Said that they're going to go. Okay. So I'm telling you, folks, Hunter Biden, Burisma, the Chinese company, CEFC, and Rosemont Seneca Holdings, all of these are all tied together in one big influence peddling scheme We have literally right now in the United States, we have a compromised president of the United States who is acting as a foreign agent for other organizations to the detriment of America's interests in order to line his pockets. I'm sorry, 10% for the big guy. That's all he cares about. Don't believe his little, oh, Scranton kid, I'm going to fight for the middle class. I'm going to fight for the lower class. All of that is nothing but bunk. His entire career is built off of plagiarism and lies. He has no experience in the outside world. And so, yeah, well, you know, and Kingba over here does a very, very good point, which Dan Bongino brought up. All they have to do is take the wording of the classified document and compare it to the Hunter Biden email. And if there is similar wording, similar style, similar sentence structure, or even if it matches exactly, okay, then we'll know. But I'm going to tell you right now, even if they find out because of the fact that Merrick Garland is the wimp that he is, he won't do anything to them as a part of our Department of Justice. Even if the House goes through and finds all of this information and ties all of this stuff together and everything else, the Senate would never go through an impeachment process. Okay. Now, Dan Bongino brings up a good point. He's like, he believes that there's somebody within the Hunter Biden organization or within the Biden administration that has actually flipped on the Bidens and is providing the Justice Department with this information. Now, there's a whole nother sector. I don't want to go into it, but there's you got to watch Dan Bongino's show where he ties a Russian oligarch to Hunter Biden and to another foreign entity over in Albania. Okay. That you got to watch it. I'm telling you, I normally don't advocate people, but I'm telling you the last 3 shows you need to watch: today's, yesterday's, and the day before's. Okay. Now, this is absolutely horrible. But the one thing that is going to come out of this realistically is the fact that we have a chink in what would be considered the political armor of all of this. Okay. So, yeah, it just, I'm telling you right now, this is, Biden is compromised. Biden's a foreign agent. Biden does nothing but what will increase Biden's holdings and Biden's money. He doesn't care about anything else other than his own skin and his own financial future. And again, like I said, Dan Bongino kind of mentions that this is, that somebody flipped. I actually, on Truth Social, I sent a message to Dan. And I posed him this question. What if it's Hunter Biden? Because if you recall, Hunter Biden was under investigation for tax fraud, tax evasion, and possibly that handgun charge where he dumped it into a trash can near a school, and that he lied on his FFL form in order to gain the handgun. What if the Justice Department has him on stuff that he doesn't want to go to jail for, or that he doesn't want to spend the money for, and he has worked out an immunity plea for all of this information? Now, I'm not saying that that's what's happening, but it certainly makes me wonder. Because this seems like this is a lot of information, specific information that is coming out about this. So no matter what, it's got to be an insider. But I was thinking that what if it was literally Hunter Biden? If you read The Laptop from Hell, you can see Hunter Biden has a lot of animosity toward Jill Biden and Joe Biden for how they treated him. This is quite interesting. It presents an interesting theory, and we'll have to see how this plays out. But I would be very interested to find out who inside the Biden cabal is actually feeding this information, because I agree with Dan. It just seems like it's a little, I don't think the FBI would have stumbled onto this. And given the fact that the FBI was spending all that time investigating Trump, I have a feeling that somebody has flipped in for compensation being some immunity on some of this stuff. So I mean, it seems kind of interesting that they sort of knew where the documents were. So I'm really kind of wondering. What's going on. Okay. So enough on that. But I left you with that kind of brain teaser. You think about that. Think about that for a little bit. All right. So our Speaker of the House, who took a while, let's admit, a historic time to get put into place. Now, McCarthy has consistently been kind of a wishy-washy Republican. He's one of those old school Republicans. He's one of those people that, anyway, I never really had any trust in him. But I have to say, this one move that he did this week, and the fact that he's standing up for it, I got to admit, this is really, really good. This is incredible. So if you recall when Nancy Pelosi took over the speakership, and especially over the last couple of years, they got rid of some of the Republican representatives on certain committees. And as a part of that, and stripped them of their committee assignments, that was historic on its own. Okay? That was historic on its own. So, this is a really good move. And even though it's being presented as maybe retaliation, which, you know what, if it is, I don't care. It's perfect. But Swalwell and, Schiff. There we go. Swalwell and Schiff were removed from the House Intelligence Committee by Speaker McCarthy. And Swalwell is not taking it well. Although, you know what, Mr. Bang Bang Fang Fang, I think you need to keep your mouth shut and just be happy that you're not under investigation for providing information to a foreign entity. I'm sorry, but you got caught sleeping with a Chinese spy. Give me a break. You're going to sit here and tell McCarthy that you're going to regret booting him off of the Intelligence Committee? Give me a frickin' break. God, the reason why we have this guy, obviously he is from California, and that just explains it. He's a Democrat from California. That just explains it right there. But the point is that Swalwell apparently is just pissed about this. Now, with Schiff, who's also a Democrat from California, with Schiff kicked out, it's because of the fact that he kept hinting and leaking information from the intelligence sources, intelligence circles, and he kept saying to the American people, oh, I know Trump is guilty. I know Trump is guilty of the whole Russia thing. Well, we know the Russia collusion hoax is literally a hoax. We have several pieces of bits of information on the entire thing where they were trying to set it up. And it looks like even more because the FBI guy, McGonigal, I think is his last name, has been arrested for working with that Russian oligarch. And that Russian oligarch and also Fusion GPS to create the false dossier that was used in order to get the FISA warrant in order to try and frame Trump. So, yeah, all of this stuff, I'm telling you, this entire thing, this is all wrapped around one single cabal. Okay. And Schiff kept saying that he had actual evidence of this, but he never presented it. So honestly, I mean, first of all, Swalwell should not even have a security clearance. If I was even married to somebody who might be suspected of being a connection to a foreign entity, and I tried to get a top secret security clearance, I wouldn't be accepted. It would have been turned down. So Swalwell just needs to go on his merry way, shut his freaking mouth, and get out of the way for real Republicans to do for the real Congress to do what they're supposed to do. And again, McCarthy apparently got heated with a reporter because the reporter scolded him for dodging the question. And McCarthy basically just told the reporter, look, you don't get to determine whether or not I answer a question. Look at Karine Jean-Pierre. She's been asked all kinds of questions, and all she does is refer people to the White House counsel. Okay, so now here's another thing that popped just recently this week. So I don't know if anybody has noticed, but the Department of Justice has been kind of going after Google for this whole thing in regards to its ad business. Now, Google obviously is part of the Alphabet group or the Alphabet company, and they have built a very large and overwhelming and overbearing conglomeration, let's say, in the ad space within the digital world. Everybody knows that if Google doesn't like you, they're going to derank you in their search listings. Everybody knows that you can pay to get ranked higher within the search listings of Google. And most of Google's revenue actually comes from ads. And so take a look at this. So the Department of Justice apparently has filed a second antitrust suit against Google and is actually seeking to break up its ad business. And they've this is the second antitrust lawsuit against Google in just 2 years, just over 2 years. And this time it's targeting just the advertising business. It's the first lawsuit, Google lawsuit, filed under the Biden administration, which is, again, seeking to break up the advertising business. And it comes soon after reports that the Department of Justice Antitrust Division Chief Jonathan Cantor had been cleared to work on the Google matters. Now, we take monopolies in this country very seriously. And so stuff like this is, it's very much frowned upon to eliminate competition from the marketplace, which is essentially what Google and its ad business has done, and been very successful at it, by the way. But here's an interesting little angle that I don't think anybody has really watched on this. And that is that Nancy Pelosi has been accused of insider trading. Well, check this out. This was reported by the Daily Wire, which was actually also reported by, I'm trying to think, who else was it reported by? I think it's been reported by the Epoch Times or a couple other places now. But Pelosi went ahead and dumped the Google stock just weeks before the Justice Department unveiled the antitrust lawsuit. Now, we all know that when these people go in for public office, they are not going there to serve the public. They are going there to get rich for themselves. Because if you notice, there are several people of Congress, as well as presidents like Barack Obama, who have walked in with very little in terms of value and have walked out with a massive buttload in value. That has been a complaint by a lot of people. Okay. Now, Nancy Pelosi has not only done this with Google, but she's also done it with a bunch of other things. And this is why we get so frustrated with some of this stuff, because apparently she is doing literally insider trading. She knows when certain things are going to impact stocks or not. And so she goes ahead and does all of this insider trading scenario. And she and her husband have made, buttloads of money off of this stuff. So Senator Hawley has introduced the Pelosi Act, which essentially is banning lawmakers from trading stocks, which is exactly what needs to be done. Exactly what needs to be done. Sorry, I'm going to pause this video that's playing in this. But this is from The Hill. So Senator Josh Hawley has introduced a bill that would ban members of Congress from trading and owning stocks, using the name of his legislation to take a jab at Nancy Pelosi. He introduced the Pelosi Act, or Preventing Elected Leaders from Owning Securities and Investments Act, renewing a legislative push to curtail stock trading by lawmakers that has failed over the last few years. Now, let's be honest. Do we really think that this is going to do anything? No, because immediately what this is going to happen is, even if it passes the House, it's going to go to the Senate. The Senate's going to either pass it or not, probably not. But if they do decide to pass it and it goes to Joe Biden's desk, he still can veto it, because we do not have a veto-proof majority in Congress as a whole. So therefore, I mean, this is just mainly just a show, just like everything else that's going to be coming out of the House in the next several months, between now and when we get another or a different elected president and have a better chance of winning the Senate in 2024. But I can tell you it's promising. It's giving us a step in the right direction, because of the fact that now what's happening is the Republicans are starting to, at least some of the Republicans are at least starting to go after things that are important on the public's mind. And especially going after people who literally have been skirting the law or literally breaking the law, either way, in Congress, and how they've been able to take over and, make all the kinds of money that they have. Now, me personally, I think that there should be a requirement that if you enter public service, you have to cut ties and not do anything that is going to benefit you outside of your congressional pay. So your congressional pay is the only money that you can make while you are in public office or public service in Congress. That's just my opinion. Because of the fact that realistically, being a public servant, serving in Congress, serving as the president, none of that was intended by our founding fathers to be a career. The idea was back then that you would go serve public office for 2 years, 4 years, 6 years, whatever it was, and then you would pass the torch, and it would be the next person's ability. But we have people in Congress that have been there for 40, 50 years. This is not a career opportunity here, folks. But with all of the unethical situations that these people have taken up, and they haven't been stopped in doing it, they've taken advantage. And it's time for us to, realistically, it's time for us to completely clean house. But of course, I know that's a pipe dream. That's really difficult to do. But the point is that, yeah, this should be a no-brainer. This should be just, hey, you know what? House pass, Senate pass, president, sign off on it. It really should. Because going into public service, you're supposed to serve the people, not yourself. Anyway, all right. So let me do a time check. Okay, I may not make it to all of my further things that I have, so let me just take a real quick look here at some of the most major ones. First of all, there's an article in here about Just the News about how the U.S. military would likely run out of some munitions within a week of a conflict with China, basically because of all the stuff that we've been sending over to Ukraine. So all of the crap that we've been sending to Ukraine has been out of our own stockpiles. And so if we were to go to war with China or have a conflict with China, we might be in trouble with our munitions. I don't know if you've seen this, but I'm going to go ahead and do it. You know how Georgia and the Georgia voting laws to require voter ID and everything else were touted by all of the Democrats, especially Stacey Abrams, as being Jim Crow 2.0 and causing all kinds of problems? Well, apparently the School of Public International Affairs at the University of Georgia did a poll, and they found that, surprise, surprise, of the respondents, 0%. Let me say that again. 0% of black Georgians had trouble voting in this past election. And Stacey Abrams was saying, oh, yes, you know, they're trying to suppress the vote. They're trying to suppress the vote. Blah, 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 blah. Well, guess what? Out of the respondents, okay, 94.3% who were asked in the poll that they were either very confident or somewhat confident that their vote would counted as intended. So in other words, a vast majority of African-American voters in Georgia, where they required to have an ID in order to be able to get the vote, in order to get an absentee vote or even to vote. Voter suppression is not happening here in the United States. I'm just going to tell you that right now. If there is one person who is legally allowed to vote who was not able to vote because of something to deal with the voting process, like showing ID or going to a station, I tell you, the lawyers in this country would absolutely love to hear from you. Call them up, because I'm telling you, the ACLU, the Anti-Defamation League, all of those people would be scrambling to get a hold of your name and number and get you into a courtroom. Okay? This is not happening, people. There is no way that asking or requiring an ID to vote is going to be a cause for voter suppression. It just isn't. And this whole idea of mail-in balloting, which we have here in the state of Washington, and frankly, I think has been the key setup since the Gregoire Rossi governor's debacle that happened, I think has been a key learning experience for the Democrats to take that same kind of model nationwide, and COVID just allowed them to do it. Okay. So anyway, the point being here is that I'm sorry, folks, it's not happening. We're not doing voter suppression. America is not racist. We're not trying to keep people from voting who legally have the right to vote and who want to vote. It's just not happening. I don't even care. It doesn't even matter. Anywhere within the 50 states, I'm going to put that right there. Anywhere within the 50 states, it's not happening, regardless of what the Democrats try and tell you and lie to you about this. Speaking of Democrats and everything, there's a guy by the name of Gavin Newsom down in California. And guess what? Gavin wants to collect taxes from people after they've moved out of state. Now, there's a proposed California wealth tax that is challenging. Driving many wealthy residents or thinking about moving out of the state. Not like California is not a good place in the first place, but apparently Gavin Newsom, who arguably, I'll be honest with you, arguably, I think they are wanting to get rid of Joe Biden, and all of this stuff may be a part of a plan to make sure that Joe Biden does not run in 2024 to make room for this greasehead to be put into the running for the office. I'll be honest with you. I seriously think that might be the case. But trust me, he's destroyed California. I don't want him. I definitely don't want him anywhere. In fact, there was a question that was thrown out on Twitter by a guy that I know that he was like, if we could trade Inslee for Newsom, would we do it? And I said, basically, hell no. There's no way. Hell no. I wouldn't even want him here. All right. There are a few other articles that I didn't get to tonight, but you can take a look. They're all in the description below. I do appreciate you guys taking the time to come here and watch the program. I hope I've been informative and everything for you. Do me a favor, if you liked what I do, run on over to Rumble. Sign up for an account. It's free. Sign up for an account. Find the Whiskey Musings Broadcast. I'm the only one on Rumble with that name. So find the Whiskey Musings Broadcast and subscribe. I have a goal of reaching 1,000 subscribers on Rumble by the end of 2023. Help me reach that goal. I really would appreciate it. And again, like I said in the beginning of the program, check out my store.whiskeymusings.online. Get great logo gear, get great motto gear. There's all kinds of stuff there. Take a look at it. And I'll see you Saturday right here on the Whiskey Musings Broadcast. Saturday night is 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll see you then. I got a couple of great questions for whiskey that are coming for the Saturday night program. Good night, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your week. We'll see you all then.